special election, I think, helped. How many of y'all know what the Public Service Commission is now?
No.
Exactly. Now, right? The special election really did help. And so we were able to get an idea. And so what we need to do is we're going to help you understand what the Georgia Public Service Commission does. And we're going to talk about how it regulates Georgia Power and how the PSC decisions shape our electric bills, our grid planning, and the state's response to rapidly growing electricity demand from these data centers. So it's a public service, it's what is it, but it's also directly related to our energy grid and data centers. Yeah, is it working? I heard something. All right. All right. So, for the first part, what I would like to do is have the candidates introduce themselves and explain. This is definitely an educational forum. All right, it's not a time to go and campaign. You can do that afterwards. And it's focused on the Public Service Commission, Georgia Power, and data centers primarily, even though as the San Riverkeeper and Georgia Innovate, I lost Gimble. Yeah, I lost Gimble.
Interfaith Power and Light.
Yeah, they mentioned that they are also powering with coal. They're also powering with methane gas, and there are other things as well. So, what I want first is introduce yourself and explain what experience or perspective that you would bring to the Public Service Commission.
So thanks for having me. I am Josh Tolbert. I am a licensed professional engineer. I have a doctorate in mechanical engineering. And the decision the PSC is making multi-decade technical decisions that affect our power bills, that affect our grid infrastructure, data centers. And all these decisions are extremely technical. There's not a single engineer on the commission. And that's what I'm running to bring. I've been working in the industry. I've designed power plants of all different types. Nuclear, fossil fuel, renewables, worked in industry and steel mills and pulp and paper. Energy has been my career, is what I understand. I am a small business owner. I understand how to connect technical decisions to economic outcomes. And that's what I'm looking to bring, an independent evaluator with a technical background that understands the economic impacts to Georgians like you and me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter Hubbard, and I was elected last year to the commission for a one-year term. And you'll see my name on the ballot again this November. I come to the commission as someone who has 16 years of industry experience. Last 3 years, I was building solar and battery plants in Texas and Michigan. For a decade before that, I was putting together power plants for utilities. So that really helps for me to sniff out the BS when the power company every 3 years, they set their plan for how to power data centers in our homes in front of us. And we really need someone who has experience, who knows what a better path looks like for Georgia. And I've modeled this. I've actually prepared some analysis, and I have more forthcoming to talk about how we can meet the moment of transitioning to cleaner energy. We could do that and actually lower folks' power bills. You don't even have to take my word for it. There are places around the country and world, like Texas, of all places, where they are embracing renewable energy, and it is driving down the cost of energy. So I see it. I know how to bring it to fruition here in Georgia, navigate all the technical side, but also the political and the policy and the economic, and all of these things that go into being a commissioner. And it's not an easy path, but it's an important one for Georgia, and that's why I took it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelia. I'm the Democratic nominee for the Public Service Commission for District 5. I ran in 2022. Many of you may know me from that time period where I won the Democratic nomination then. We were headed towards the general election, and Patty LaRae and myself were taken off the ballot because of the legal challenge relative to how the votes were decided. They sent us home, left the Republicans in place, and 67 great increases later, here we are. I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, right nearby, on the coast in Myrtle Beach. I was one of 9 children, born to parents who were children themselves. And we figured out how to make it work. I went to Community College in Columbia. I was the first in my family to go, and I've had many that have followed me, leading that path towards our educational future. I've worked in government on a local, state, and federal level. I was Cynthia McKinney's, campaign manager during the time period when she covered this area because we came back and forth to Augusta. I worked with David Scott when he worked with Congress. I was his campaign manager, then went on to become his district director. I worked with Bill Campbell and a number of other people in and around the city of Atlanta. My background includes also having worked in worked in a technical environment. I worked for Kennedy Space Center for Lockheed Martin on the space shuttle program. So I shared this with someone the other day, and they said, "Well, I'm a hidden figure in this particular race," and I'm like, "Yeah, I am. I work with engineers from Lockheed, NASA, Grumman, ETSG. I worked right after scholarship was, and we had to figure out how to return the flight. And I was charged with creating the documentation that was used to process the shuttle and safely get the orbiter off the ground and return back to Earth. So that means that I've had experience in that area. I've also worked in my community on advocacy, advocating for issues that impact our quality of lives. So I'm a triple threat. I've had experience in all 3 areas. And I don't think we need another engineer on the PSC. I think what we need is to have engineers that are there to do their jobs. So again, I'm Shelia Edwards. I'm running for your vote. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. One of the things that I would like you to look at is define. What do you think the public, well, I know you know what it is. What is the Public Service Commission? What is their authority, and how do you see that as impacting data centers, energy grid, that type of thing? I'm going to start with Peter.
Sure. So I serve on the commission now and see it from the inside. The Public Service Commission regulates how much you pay on your power bill and your gas bill if you're a Georgia Power Company customer or any gas bill really, because the base demand charge is Atlanta Gas Light and we have retailers on top. And well, we don't have oversight directly over electric membership corporations, which or the municipal electric providers. So there's a good portion of the state where we don't have jurisdiction. The Georgia Power is a 900-pound gorilla. Where they go, if they decide to build a nuclear power plant outside of Augusta, then you get the EAGS, that's the municipal electric provider. You get the Oglethorpe Power that provides power to the EMCs. They join. So Georgia Power is incredibly important in this picture. And Georgia Power is behind some of the data center purchase here in the state, right? The data centers are coming for a few reasons. One is the tax abatements. You heard Senator Jones talk about trying to dial back the tax abatements. $2.5 billion in tax revenues that were forsaken this year. That is tax revenue that could have come into state coffers and help pay for things. So they're coming for the tax abatements and the cheap power. And so the Public Service Commission has a critical role. If we continue to roll out the red carpet for data centers with cheap power, then they're going to keep knocking on our door. But we're taking a big risky bet, in my opinion, with these data centers. We're building the wrong resources for them. We're building fossil fuel resources that are going to lock us into more climate change. And we could be doing better. So what I see as my role on the commission is to steer us towards clean energy that lowers our power bills. And if we're going to invite data centers to come to our state, then they need to pay their fair share. And we already know for a fact that that is not the case. So it's very important that we have leadership on the commission when we have the next chance to true up rates. That's the 2028 rate case. That's why I'm here to talk about all of this, because it's important. And so that's what the Public Service Commission does. It oversees how much you pay on your power bill and where that energy comes from.
You could answer that question, but also what ultimately, what is the
operating under Georgia. We did a lot of the rules and regulations coming from the General Assembly to the House and the Senate side, make determinations as to what will happen and pass that information on to the Public Service Commission members. The members themselves also have the ability to have conversations, communicate with the public, communicate with other experts, and come up with some good decisions for our community. When I ran in 2022, I ran because I got a power bill that was over $600. And I knew I shouldn't have a $600 bill because I live alone. And so I decided to run, not just for myself, but for the families of four that are trying to figure out how to pay their bills to seniors. We're trying to figure out whether to pay the bills to get the medications for veterans. For other folks who are marginalized and who are having their powers turned off in the dead of winter or the hot days this summer, and they don't have relief. And in order to get their powers back on, they have to pay a connection fee. So they have to come up with all these things, and you see meeting after meeting where people are going to the Public Service Commission and begging, pleading, crying, and asking these folks to do something better, to change the trajectory of what's going on with the PSC in Georgia. And they've been ignored. Each and every time that Georgia Power wanted to rate increase, we rubber stamp. They want more money, rubber stamp. They want this, that, and the other thing, rubber stamp. And the people who are paying for it is all of you in this room and everybody else across Georgia. So that's why I'm running to be that third vote on the PSC, to join Peter and Dr. Alicia and making some good decisions for our community, for our state, fair decisions. I'm not against businesses making money, but we're on a monopoly and we're making billions of dollars each quarter. You have to do something different. And I believe they have a plan, and when I join the PSC, I'm going to be urging them to install that plan. Thank you.
As someone with 5 kids who's a Georgia Power customer, I can also appreciate the concern for the increased rate. Instead of regurgitating what's been said here, I want to do a little high-level explanation of what the Public Service Commission is. So I'm Georgia Power. Who else here is Georgia Power customer? How many of you have a choice to use another utility? Okay. So they're a monopoly. You have no other choice. If you ask me in one sentence to say what is the job of the Public Service Commission, it's to make sure Georgia Power makes decisions similar to what it would if you could go to somebody else. There's no competitive incentive for them to have a lower price or a better service. You go buy shoes, you have lots of options. They're incentivized to build better shoes at lower cost, so you'll buy those. Georgia Power doesn't have that incentive. So we have the Public Service Commission to create that incentive. Their job is to make sure that the competitive pressures of giving low value, low prices, and high quality of service, that is the job of the Public Service Commission. And so the litmus test is Georgia Power making decisions that they would make if you could go to somebody else? If they are, the Public Service Commission is probably doing a reasonable job. If they're not, there's significant areas of opportunity for improvement, and I certainly think there are opportunities for improvement.
Here is my next question. I was going to talk about Georgia Power is a private investor-owned monopoly. Okay, so just as he said, customers cannot make a choice, right? Now there are some EMCs and electrical ones, but Georgia Power is the big one. So one of the things that I was going to ask is, what does that require of the PSC? Where should cooperation with Georgia Power end, and then independent scrutiny begin? Because what are some evidence that tell you that the commission is acting as an effective regulator rather than just responding to sick requests? And we'll start with you first. Yeah.
Well, I think you all may have gotten one of the cards that we were passing out on the back. It's this. It lets you know who's been in charge for the last 20 years. When it comes to executive, the governor is Republican, the legislature, both House and Senate, Republican, and the Public Service Commission, Republican. This is what the decision-making has looked like relative to your utility bills. It doesn't matter that Peter and Dr. Alicia got elected in November. They're trying to do the right thing for all of us. But until we get that very critical vote, nothing's going to change.
Did it again. Now you have to yell.
All right. As I was saying, until we get that very critical vote, nothing is going to change. It doesn't matter if I get elected, if he doesn't get elected, nothing will change. It doesn't matter if he gets elected, if I don't get elected, nothing will change. You like what's been going on, and I've prayed for the last 20 years. You like paying high power bills. You like not being able to take care of your families and your other obligations. And keep doing this. If you want change, and you want something different, I'm offering myself as your alternative. Bring about positive changes that we need for our community, to bring about positive changes that we need for our state, and to make sure that Georgia Power can make money, and we cannot be making money on the back of hard-working Georgians.
My question is, how would you, if you get elected, what evidence will tell us that you are an effective regulator?
Well, the
Okay?
evidence-
How do we know that you're actually, not favoring Georgia Power, that you are actually looking and scrutinizing what Georgia Power is asking?
The evidence will be my vote. I'm not going to allow them to bring another rate increase request to the PSC without there being some justified reason for it. I'm going to be looking for them to come up with some real issues that they can impact, real things that they can do to bring about a better rate for our community. I'm going to be pushing for those questions to be asked and answered. I'm going to be working with Peter, Dr. Alicia, and the rest of the PSC, because I believe there are people on the PSC currently that know the right thing to do, but they're not doing it, because they're not being challenged or encouraged to do that. But when we have a majority on the PSC, we're going to be able to drive that situation, not just follow. Peter made a number of different recommendations over the past 6 months, and they've all been overshadowed. He's been outvoted because he doesn't have that critical vote. He's put some things on the table that would really impact our lives.
Let's hear from him. Tell us.
Sure. Okay, so here's how you know I'm being an effective regulator. One is, the proof is in the pudding. Is your bill going up or is it going down? We did have 6 rate increases, and then we had a rate freeze, so they locked in those high rates. And we did have a small adjustment downwards, but it's so small it's not worth talking about. So I will say that they went up 6 times, and they started going in the right direction, but I've got more work to do. I am very clear-eyed about Georgia Power. They are there to maximize shareholder profit, and they have all the resources in the world, and all the high-priced lawyers and engineers and such to bring their case before the commission, and they put their view of what the direction for Georgia should be in terms of energy and how much we should be charging for it. But if I'm just a reactive and sit back on my laurels kind of commissioner, then we're going to keep getting the same thing we've been getting. I'm out there trying to proactively show the vision for what we can do differently in Georgia. And what you will see is that when we start to embrace clean energy, you'll see the results in your power bill. Just like we're seeing in Texas, it will lower the cost of energy because these are the cheapest resources. We build Plant Vogtle, and I'm a fan of nuclear energy. My favorite nuclear power plant is the sun, but it was a very costly power plant. And so, I think I'd actually like to create a dashboard. Here's how much clean energy we're producing. Here's what your bill looks like, and see how that changes. Put kind of a scoreboard up there so that you can clock what my change and effectiveness of being a commissioner is. So it's a really difficult job, and Georgia Power, holding them accountable, and they're highly resourced, deep-pocketed. They can bring every argument you can think of to the table. It's my job to present what I believe to be the counter-argument, which is what is in the best interest of Georgians. And knowing that they've got their incentives, you should know as well, Georgia Power has a number of affiliated companies that are wholly owned by Southern Company, the parent company, that profit off the sale, the transportation, the remarketing of natural gas. That's why you always see gas in their power plants, because they make a boatload of money off of it. So, that's my job, is to be a guardian against that, to again, sniff out the BS and point out where they can do better and proactively put a vision out there that we can run on.
I'll answer the question, but I want to quickly address something. So I will point out the elephant in the room. I am a Republican running for this position. Okay? There are a lot of political positions that I think ideology plays a role. I don't think the Public Service Commission should be one. I frankly think it should be a nonpartisan position. And Republicans have made a lot of mistakes on the commission. I, for one, challenge an incumbent Republican. That tells you that I believe there's some room for improvement. But let me ask, what is more likely the scenario here? That the mistakes were made because of the letter beside their name, or because it was 5 people without energy experience? I think one makes a lot more sense than the other. To make the argument that if it was all Democratic commission without energy experience, there would be no mistakes, seems to me to not be based on a lot of information. I am not asking people to vote for a Republican. I'm asking people to vote for an engineer that understands energy. And I understand energy. In terms of the question being asked, Georgia Power, I don't view Georgia Power as the enemy. We want a strong utility providing us reliable power. But they absolutely need to be checked. They absolutely need to be held accountable for the decisions that they make. And it is my opinion that I have the ability to ask the questions and call them on information that we haven't necessarily had a whole lot. I understand the technical details of how we make. I understand the energy mixes. I understand the cost drivers. I understand the impacts. And so that's why I believe that I'm uniquely qualified to be able to do this. But to answer the question specifically, those are the ways that we know that we're holding them accountable. Does every proposal they present to the Public Service Commission can be what they want? Does every single proposal get passed? Or is it amended, changed, and improved? And does that result, as Peter said, in lowering prices, changing energy mixes? Are these results of the decisions? If so, you're doing an effective job. If each and every proposal they're continuing with the same thing they've always had, then you're probably right.
Thank you. Going with that, Georgia Power has based major generation and grid proposals on forecasts, and we talked about that in our earlier one about speculations of extraordinary energy demand, much of it attributed to data centers. So what standards, we talked about ordinances earlier, but what standards should the PSC use to independently test those forecasts before approving millions of dollars in new infrastructure?
So it's a great question. There's a lot of different ways to forecast load. And we can talk about that, but I actually want to talk about something a little bit more important. It's not how you forecast load, it's what decisions you make with the forecasting of the load. So I went into the Public Service Commission last fall and objected to the 10 megawatt expansion because I thought it was a mistake. And it was a mistake because they were increasing power based on speculative forecasts. And it wasn't even because I disagreed with the forecast. I don't know if the forecasts are right or wrong. It's a lot of proprietary information that the public doesn't have information for. My objection was that your job as the Public Service Commission isn't to make sure the forecast is right or wrong. Well, I want it to be as accurate as possible. The job of the Public Service Commission is to make sure that the public is protected if the forecast is wrong. As an engineer, I view the Public Service Commission like a safety device, like a railing on a balcony. You don't need a railing on the balcony if you don't trip. Okay? The purpose of the Public Service Commission is not that if they nail the forecast right, we don't even need the Public Service Commission if it's perfectly forecasted and everything's great. How do we protect the ratepayer if it's not? And so I believe they did a poor job. They approved basically the entire portfolio. I think it should be steps, construction. As executed contracts come in, you have milestones that you get, production, that we should include optionality and flexibility. That as we get further processed, as we better understand how close we work with the actual projections, we have the ability to adjust course. And I don't think that was effectively done. And so when I'm talking about the forecast is really important. What's more important is how do you apply that forecast in the decisions that you make. And that's something that I think we can do a better job of.
So it is an enormous amount of load growth that is coming to the state in data centers. Josh mentioned 10,000 megawatts. The power companies out there looking for another 6,000 megawatts right now that they're going to bring to the commission in February, and I already know it's going to be gas-fired generation because of how they prepared the request for proposals. And all of this development is for speculative large load growth from data centers. We had a big OpenAI contract be announced a couple of weeks ago, and it will take the power of 3 Atlantas to run that one data center just outside of Savannah. Or if you like, 3 Vogel units that just got built here. And we do have to be careful because we're making really big bets on the speculative load growth, that these data centers are going to stick around, that we're really accounting for all the positives and negatives, including the net benefit, the job losses rather, from these data centers. And we do need to have a safety mechanism that they course correct. One of the things that I think we should do is make them pay up front for these costs, not over time, but up front. We're making really big, risky bets, tens of billions of dollars. And if those data centers don't show up in the numbers advertised, or even if they do, if they show up but don't stick around for the decades needed to pay off this infrastructure we're making today, then who's left holding the bag? That's my deep concern, is that we're making a big risky bet that does have some upside, but it has a lot of downsides to it as well. We're being asked to make that bet under cover of NDAs and without really having transparent information out there. So it's why I'm putting my neck out there a little bit, talking about something I probably shouldn't be talking about, but I think people need to know that we're building a data center that will take the power of 3 Atlantas. And what's the fallback mechanism if that falls through? So I am concerned, and we need to have more protections in there. There are options for these data centers to terminate their contracts early, and who is left holding the bag if that happens? So no one has a crystal ball. No one knows if this AI bubble is going to burst or not, but we are in a rapidly expanding time where they're just shoveling money towards these data centers. And I'm just deeply concerned about the big risky bet that we're taking.
Okay, well, I want to step back and just share my thoughts on something. This is about R versus D. Don't let anybody fool you. Contrary to the thoughts, a lot of folks thought that someone would go to Washington and do the right thing, and you see what's going on now. We're suffering from it. So don't let anybody convince you that it's not an R versus D situation. Frederick Douglass once said, power concedes nothing without a demand. I'm here to tell you that Georgia Power concedes nothing without a Democratic majority on the commission. I appreciate the thoughts and ideas that the rest of the panel has, but until you do something different, until you make a change, until you bring about somebody who's going to fight for you and your community, your family, you're going to have the same situation over the next 6 years. So it's really up to you all to make a decision. You know, as my colleague here said, Georgia has allowed all of these companies, these data centers to come into our communities. And then when they're coming into our communities, they're looking for someplace to, air their lives, stay in their grids. You look at the family in Sparta that just lost their land, 100-year-old property. What was theirs is no longer theirs. And that can happen to each and every one of you. So I'm running to be that third vote. I'm running to be the voice in the room. I'm running to bring about good things for our community in relationship to decisions that are being made by the PSC. And yes, I'll be watching each and every dime. I'll be watching each and every decision, and I'll be leading those conversations because that's who I am in terms of my background in community development and in technology. It's not going to be a rubber stamp anymore with Georgia Power. It's not going to be families in fear of losing their land just because somebody else wants their property. It's going to be real action coming about because that's what we're doing at the PSC. Thank you.
You mentioned something that's not even in my notes, but one of the things you talked about losing land. PSC doesn't do anything with eminent domain, but that is something that is happening because of decisions that the PSC has made. Can you talk to that?
Someone had somebody go. This is an incredibly important topic, this idea of eminent domain. And here's what I've discovered, is that in the state of Georgia, there's two things you should know. There's siting and there's eminent domains. So if you have a private data center and a private electric utility that would like to connect, and your property happens to stand in the way, then Georgia Power is going to knock on your door and say, we would like to buy or lease your land. And if you're not willing to play ball, then they go to eminent domain. And what I've discovered is that you're right, the eminent domain for electric transmission lines is not a PSC jurisdictional topic. It's for superior courts. The only thing that we do have jurisdiction over in terms of eminent domain are railroads. And what was just mentioned is the taking of private land that had been in 30 families or so since the Civil War was taken for a private quarry. But the electric transmission lines is really important right now. We're building over 1,000 miles of electric transmission lines. This is Georgia Power Company. and so there, I discovered that there is a huge gap where no one has stepped into this gap to define what are the rules and regulations for best practices on siting electric transmission lines. It's just never been done, so Georgia Power just does what it wants to do. Now, if I could find a third vote, then what we could do at the commission is open up a notice of proposed rulemaking to say, here's how you're going to go about citing electric transmission lines. And now we've got rules in place. They have to, just all of the things that we need to do, not just take your land, but negotiate fairly. And if, there's no way to connect A to B, then find a different route. Find folks who do want that deal that you're offering. So, again, I just need to find 3 votes, including myself, to be able to implement that. I haven't found that on the commission yet. I got 2 votes, but I need a third to start that notice of proposed rulemaking so that we can help the folks that there's hundreds of people that are affected by these transmission lines. And I might not be able to help those folks right now, but we can put the rules in place for future so that it's done the right way. And it's a little frustrating to be powerless in that sense, but I'm glad you asked the question because we can do something about it when we see that there's a gap that we can step into.
We'll see how long it lasts. So, yes, while they don't have, well, I guess it doesn't have jurisdiction over eminent domain specifically, each and every transmission expansion is put forth in front of the Public Service Commission. And so there's an ability, Peter just says he's going to vote for me so I can be his third vote. So when we look at what are the potential properties that are going to be impacted, but it's not like we just wake up one day and all of a sudden now, oh, we didn't even realize there was this property here that we need to pay attention to. This can be part of, as Peter was mentioning, kind of a rules process that early in the transmission proposal stage, what properties are potentially going to be impacted. And then, yes, I think there needs to be some fair ways that we're negotiating. It's not a negotiation when the result is if you say, no, I'm just going to take it. That is not a negotiation. And so there needs to be some framework around that. And also, look, I believe firmly in private property rights. I'm not saying there's never a case in the domain is appropriate. Certainly there is sometimes. But the burden of proof should be tremendous. You demonstrate that not only is it necessary, it's necessary for the public good, and there are no remotely reasonable alternatives. And I'm not sure that we have hit that bar. Too quickly and too easily are we forcing negotiations that result in taking its property. If you're familiar with Fayette County, Coweta County, it is a massive, massive issue right now to buy transmission lines for one project scale. And so that's something that we need to address. And I think while they don't have jurisdiction, PSC doesn't have jurisdiction, they certainly can impact it.
Well, I could just say at one time in our history, we had to use eminent domain. When we were creating our country, we had to use eminent domain to build bridges and roads and railroads. That's not the situation now. And to turn around and allow anyone to take somebody else's property is improper. And I don't think any occasions should warrant that, Josh. I'm sorry. But I think that people's property belongs to people. And if you want to sell, yes. And if you don't want to sell, no. And they need to go and find something else. But I don't think anybody's property should be taken away from them. This is still America. This is still a country where we're supposed to be able to acquire things and hold on to that if we want to, and do something different if we want to do something different, but not because we're forced to do so. And contrary to my friend on the end, I don't agree with him.
Thank you. All right, now let's get back. All right. What protections should ensure residential customers are not left paying for speculative development? And some of you have talked about supporting deposits, minimum payment contracts, maybe financial guarantees from large load customers, that type of thing. So, what kinds of things so that we're not held holding the ball, and we also don't have the effects of Plant Vogel that was supposed to save us money but has increased our power?
How to protect residential ratepayers? Really good question, right? I mean, we have to not make the wrong decision in the first place. We're building out fossil fuel infrastructure, which is locking us into more climate change. And just as a concrete example, the power company came to the commission and asked for $912 million in storm cost recovery, mostly Hurricane Helene. And here we are contributing more to that problem. We're going to see more heat waves, more stronger hurricanes, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. So we're not even factoring in that residential ratepayer protection, and we're expanding fossil fuel. Why? Because I told you, Georgia Power has all these affiliate companies that make a little bit of money off gas. Certainly just not building the wrong thing in the first place is going to be a ratepayer protection, but a lot to go beyond that as well. And really, I think it just comes down to who's on the commission when these decisions come due. So Gail, you mentioned that the Vogel decision happened. There was a prudency review when those units came online, and we were meant to look at all the costs incurred by Vogel. So it's supposed to be $14 billion, came in at $37 billion, but we didn't even get that prudency review. We basically just said, here's a small portion the shareholders are going to eat, and then the rest goes on ratepayers. And it's what a business to be in if you're Georgia Power, that you get a guaranteed 11.9% return on everything you build. So that's the business model. Build a bunch of stuff, put it in the rate base, earn that guaranteed 11.9% each and every year, including cost overruns on Plant Vogel. I mean, what business can you go into where you get profit off of the mistakes?
Meteorology.
Yeah. So it's just remarkable, and so we need to be as regulatory watchdogs. We have to put those guardrails up, and we know that they're going to ask for the world, and we have to push back on that and make sure that they're paying for their own mistakes. The shareholders, not ratepayers, are eating those mistakes. And I also think, just real quickly, I'll conclude. I mentioned 11.9%. If you go higher than that, and the industry average is 9.7%. So the difference is a few percentage points, but it's also about $1 billion. That's the difference. The power company should make a profit so that they don't go under, so we can have reliable power, but they should not be making excess profit. And that's what's happening right now, and it's just been that way for the last 20 years. So I'm looking to do something different. Proactively show how we can lower bills, hold the power company accountable, and that will have an impact on those bills. That's, to me, how we protect ratepayers, proactively managing the energy future and dialing back these enormous requests from Georgia Power.
I think the most important thing to do is to have the right people at the table. We know who's been at the table for the last 20 years. We know who's been making the decisions for the last 20 years. We know who has rejected plea after plea to folks coming to the Public Service Commission for relief. That's not been the Democrats. That's not been Peter or Dr. Alicia. That's been the people on this street that I've shared with you guys. So we have to make intelligent decisions around these. But when it comes to being a part of the Public Service Commission, I will be charged with making the right decision for you. You can count on me to do that because I am you. I come from a community where my family was marginalized. I enjoy a good middle-class lifestyle now, but I never forgot where I came from. And that's why when people come and talk to me, I understand their stories. Because as a young child watching my parents try to figure it out. I'm not an adult, and I'm watching families trying to figure it out. I'm watching seniors and veterans trying to figure it out. And we have a PSC that's wedged into a position where all they can think about is making sure that Georgia Power gets more money. And we don't need another person on that helping usher that position or bolster that position. We need somebody on the PSC that's going to vote for you. And that's not going to haggle about it or go into a back room and redact some documents and then come out with an answer and it was out of their power. You know who you're going to get with me. You know, during the summer they asked me to sign off on something that I would not take any money from Georgia Power or its lobbyists or its attorneys. And I said, you don't have to worry because you're not going to give me any money. Because I've been talking about them. I've been pointing out their issues. I've been pointing out that they have pillaged our community and that they need to stop and come up with a better plan. Just like Stephen Miller's in the White House in the basement coming up with whatever plans, they need to have somebody in Georgia Power's basement coming up with a better plan that would allow citizens and ratepayers to pay less. And so that's going to be my charge. Voting, holding people accountable, making sure that all of these documents that are redacted don't go redacted because supposed trade secrets. Well, when you're a monopoly, who are you hiding it from? You're the only person that's getting a chance to look at it. So the public doesn't know what they're paid in terms of the rate because you're redacting it. We don't know what's going on in your decisions because you're redacting it. And so I'm going to make sure that information is made available, the PSC is coming to you and your communities, and that we're going to be putting the public back into the Public Service Commission. People before profits. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right. Basically, what the question was what protections would ensure residential customers are not left paying for speculative development? And specifically, would you support deposits, minimum payment contracts, or financial guarantees from those large load customers?
Interestingly enough, the things that you mentioned wouldn't address speculative forecasts. So the problem with speculative means we think they're going to come and they don't actually come. The solutions that you mentioned about upfront collateral, contracts, that is a protection that if they come, what if they leave? That's an entirely different problem than forecast. I'm in support of all of those things. I'm in support of collateral, insurance, policies, contractual obligations that are sufficient, not just in name, but sufficient, that we're not holding the bag if they leave. But from a forecasting standpoint, this is we've heard earlier talking about Senate Bill 34. You've probably all heard about ratepayer pledges and all this stuff. None of that protects against this. That can protect against a data center leaving early. But you cannot hold Google or Amazon or Meta responsible if you build a power plant thinking they're going to come and they never sign the contract. Guess who pays for that? You and me. That's what we need protection from. And so the way you do that is stepped, reasonable construction based on executed contracts, optionality and flexibility of what your generation mix is so you can adjust course. This is not about, I have no idea if the bubble's going to bust or not. It may not. But if it does, what are we going to do about it? And I think that's the more important question.
Thank you. All right. Before approving new power plants.
Excuse me, maybe that's the question.
Sure.
For the clarification of the community, what do you mean by the bubble bust? What does that mean? What does that term mean?
AI is so big, it's growing so fast, all these data centers are being built, but is it like, we've all seen, the dot-com bubble bust, and are all these data centers coming right now, and then in 3 years, the industry is going to collapse, and we've built all these power plants for potential data centers that no longer exist. That's what we typically mean by, is the bubble going to bust?
Thank you.
Yeah, there's heat bubble bust. Right? And before approving new power plants, what alternatives should the PSC require Georgia Power to evaluate, such as energy efficiency, demand response, battery storage, or even distributed energy resources? I'll start with you. power plants, okay? What should the PSC require, because we're talking about holding the Georgia Power accountable. So what should we require them to give us, essentially? What kind of information? Such as energy efficiency, demand response, battery storage, or distributed energy resources.
Well, in 2022, when I was running for the PSC, I think actually Vogel was still being built, cost overruns, delays, et cetera, and Georgia Power was able to pass that on to you all as ratepayers. I think before we look at building another nuclear power plant, we have to look at alternatives. Solar is a program that Georgia Power is not very serious about. They created 5,000 slots, years ago, and of course those slots got taken up. But we have millions of people in our state who would like to be able to participate, but they can't because Georgia Power doesn't want them to. They want you to continue to buy their utilities, pay the high costs, and forget about alternatives like solar that can make a big difference in our lives. I was recently at a meeting with Peter with Ambassador Andy Youngs, and he talked to us about how the power went out, and the only power in his neighborhood was his because he had solar in the back of the house. We look at folks in South Georgia, when these storms come through, and it takes weeks, months for them to get power back on, get something restored, get returns to some level of decency for life, for their quality of life. But if they had solar and had a quality solar program in place, that could change that situation for them. So I believe that before we do another $1 billion nuclear power plant, that we look at alternatives. I think we look at what's going on with the rest of our country, to find out best practices, and not just look at our country, look at, across the ocean, see what some of these other countries are doing. Because they're making better decisions than we're making here in America, and they're making better decisions than Georgia. Georgia is one of the worst when it comes to being able to provide alternatives for the utilities. So that would be a big factor for me. What are the alternatives? And solar would be one of those ones that I would be championing.
I think this is working, yeah. So you mentioned 4 different technologies, all of which are great, and then Sheila just mentioned solar. Before we build any other new power plant, let's do the low-hanging fruit first, right? We only get about 7% of our energy from solar, whereas right now in this very moment in Texas, their entire state is powered 45% by solar right now. So we could do a lot better, and solar is the cheapest and fastest to deploy, and the more we deploy, the lower your power bills get if we have commissioners that are directing that value and those benefits towards ratepayers. But there are also a lot of other things. So the big data center down in Effingham County does have one good thing about it, and that's the first time that any utility I've seen across the nation has required a data center to sign a contract that has load flexibility in it. So it's 3 Atlantas, but a few times a year they have to dial back one of those Atlantas, 1,000 megawatts worth of power. And because of that, we don't have to build as many power plants. So the first and best option before we decide to build a power plant is, do we even need that power plant? Because if we don't build it, then we don't incur those costs. But there are also a lot of other great options out there besides that load flexibility. There's things called virtual power plants. There's a lot of folks that have solar and batteries around the state. There should be more. Well, we can tie this together with software, and they can operate like a virtual power plant. And now, once again, you've avoided building a brand new $1 billion power plant. That is, if you've got customers coming to the state paying in, but you're not building new power plants for them because you're embracing energy efficiency and distributed energy resources that you can aggregate as a virtual power plant. And the other things you mentioned, well, you have more people paying in, and that lowers your costs. So I'm the kind of person that wants to harness these customers that are coming to the state to help lower power bills, but we're not going to do it if we're building fossil fuel power plants or another Vogel, even if there's a benefit to having carbon-free energy from nuclear. We just need to do the low-hanging fruit first, which is solar, energy efficiency, and things of that nature.
I think your question wasn't about a specific type of generation, it was just if we're gonna go to another generation plan. And I agree with much of what was said up here, so I won't regurgitate a lot of that. So yes, there's a lot of things that we need to do, but at the highest level, if Georgia Power comes and says they want to build a power plant, there's some things we need to evaluate. One is the substantiation of the requirement, what type are you building, what are the specific cost controls, and what alternatives have you considered? Now, they mentioned a lot of alternatives, but there's some others that were not mentioned specifically. It's not one that Georgia Power will like, but I think it's one that's necessary. Georgia Power makes money primarily from return on equity, building facilities, owning facilities, and getting a return on that ownership. There are other alternatives. There are a lot of independent power producers, a lot of independent companies that build power plants. And every now and then we put out RFPs, requests for proposals, where we allow other companies to bid into and say, I'll build a power plant for X amount of money, whatever type it may be. That creates some natural competitive pressures that require Georgia Power to be less expensive than that other option, or we go with the other option. So if we do decide there needs to be a power plant, I don't think we should automatically default to Georgia Power is automatically the contractor and owner of that power plant, unless they are a more cost competitive option than another independent power producer.
Just do a quick follow-up to that.
There is a modicum of competitiveness, right? I mentioned that they certified 10,000 megawatts last December, just before I joined the commission, and they're out there looking for 6,000 megawatts now. But what came in the door in that competitive procurement? Entirely company-owned proposals. So Georgia Power is a regulated industry, but they have a sister company, 100% owned by Southern Company, that is unregulated, that can come in as an independent power producer and develop gas plants or whatever it happens to be. So how competitive is it if literally every project was company-owned proposal, or there was one other and it was NextEra, they're the largest both gas and solar developer in the world. And that's who it was. It was preponderance of company-owned proposals. So that's another reason why we need to be careful about the procurement side of things.
And I do mean a true RFP, open RFP.
And I think Peter's correct, and that's why you have to have someone who's your watchdog on the PSC, because they will do these things. They will hide it behind their backs. They will redact. They'll allow their friends and neighbors to come in through the side doors. They'll do these things, and the person that ends up paying is us. So you have to have someone there that's looking beyond making sure that these folks get taken care of. You have to have someone who's going to talk about you and your families and how we're going to protect your situations versus allowing these companies to come back in and build more monopolies on top of the monopolies they already have. So again, do your research, understand who's for you, and make sure we're holding the powerful accountable.
All right, I've got two questions now, because I know we started late, so we're running later on. One is on transparency. The Public Service Commission proceedings are online, we can see them, you can know, they're technical. They're very technical. So what kind of changes would you make so that ordinary Georgians can better understand those issues, participate before those decisions are made, and hold y'all accountable?
I think that is an incredibly important point, and it's been one of the focuses of mine. So, as a career, I am an expert witness and I was a professor, and basically what that means is you have to take the technical information and distill it in a way that everybody can understand. I believe that right now one of the problems is when you make a decision, the way that you make that decision is very different if you have to explain that decision afterwards. Right? And so I believe a couple things. Number one, and I can speak for me personally, I don't actually know what jurisdiction I have to control what the PSC does, but for me individually, then I believe that each and every decision made, there should be a simplified technical write-up that you put out why you made the decision, what the decision was, explaining it. I think there should be opportunity for town hall and Q&A. I also think while we have public comment, I don't think it's done well. Because you have a large percent of people that are upset, it's not necessarily valuable to the conversation, and you have some people that have really, really thoughtful, insightful consideration, but don't have enough time to talk about it. So I think we need to improve the public opportunity to speak into those things, because it is not a situation where I think that myself or anybody else in the Public Service Commission is, just because you're in the public, you don't know more about this than I do, or you don't have a better idea than I do. But currently the way it's set up, there's not an acceptable way to genuinely get public feedback, and I think that needs to change.
So I serve on the Public Service Commission right now, so you should be asking me, what am I doing about transparency? And one of the things that I'm doing is sticking my neck out a little bit talking about this OpenAI contract, because it's such a big, risky bet that we need to be talking about the implications of it. There's a say in that. And I think we will be able to open things up again with a different commission, hopefully next year. So far in the last couple decades, there hasn't been an interest in opening up more transparency, but I think it's important to do so. I like how Commissioner Johnson has asked, she lives in Savannah, so she's asked, can we have a PSC meeting in Savannah, not always in Atlanta. We're going to do an admin meeting on September 15th in Savannah, followed by a town hall. And I think that's a good step, but we've got a lot more work to do.
Field trip?
Well, I think that the third vote here is going to help get the transparency that the public needs, and I'm looking forward to winning the seat in November and making that situation happen. When I worked at Kennedy Space Center and worked with Lockheed, NASA, engineers, EG&G, Grumman, I had to hold review meetings. I didn't allow one engineer to bring information to me and say, put this in the book, or remove this, or whatever. I brought them all together, and we sat down at the table, and we came up with a plan, because it was really important in terms of returning the flight. I don't think there's anything more technical than trying to put an orbiter into space. And that situation taught me that you can't take anybody's opinion over another person's opinion. You have to bring everybody together, and you have to come up with the solutions, and you have to sign your name on it and take ownership of it. But when we turn around and we're redacting things, and we're keeping it from the public eye, we don't know what we're paying for our fuel because they're redacting it. Are we not entitled to know that? Instead of just being given a number and being told to pay. So that's the kind of commissioner I'm going to be when I get elected. Someone who's going to make sure that you know exactly what's going on, because I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to encourage everyone to lessen the redactions. I think you guys watched where they tried to accuse Patty Duran of taking proprietary secrets off of the table. And, there were no proprietary secrets. That was all their information, and it was probably just their lunch order. Who knows? But they turned around and tried to make that an issue and tried to hurt her with that. And it shouldn't be anything, if it's proprietary, why are you having it out on the desk? Shouldn't you be the first person that's protecting it? So I say all that to say that, the redaction of information, that needs to stop. And there's going to be certain situations where you have to redact. You have to protect certain things. But everything, that doesn't make any sense. And I've worked with, with Kennedy Space Center and DoD documents where we have to protect information. I understand those things. But what's going on at the PSC, I don't think it's fair to consumers. I don't think it's fair to ratepayers. And I don't think it's fair to Georgians, period, who are just interested in knowing what's going on in our PSC. So we have to open those doors up. And again, I agree taking the PSC to the public. Everyone I've talked to, I've told them I'm coming to see you. I'm coming down to Albany. I'm going to Tifton. I'm going to Muskogee County. I'm going to go all over the place, and I'm going to encourage the PSC to take the meetings to the people. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and keep it, and this is my last one. What is the single most important decision you think the Public Service Commission will face during the next 6 years? Because these are 6-year terms. So during your term, what is the most important decision And what principle will guide your vote?
Well, as Peter and I were driving down here, we talked about our rate discussion is coming up in a couple of years. That's going to be important and impactful to the people of our state. Another important one is once I'm elected to the PSC, I'm going to be voting for Peter Hubbard to chair that commission so that we can have eyes, ears, and a thoughtful mind leading us forward. And with me and Dr. Alicia following his lead and bringing about positive things that we need in our communities. But again, being willing to vote for the people, vote for you and your families, vote for seniors. That's what I'm bringing to the table. I don't think we can engineer ourselves out of what's going on with these rate increases. We don't need another engineer to tell us what's going on because we got them already at the table. And what they've been doing at the table is rubber stamping and telling the PSC members, go ahead and rubber stamp it. It's good. We need somebody who's going to lead for our community, lead from the perspective of knowing the negative impacts and how every decision impacts how these folks move forward, how we all move forward as a state. So that's who I'm going to be, and that's what I'm going to vote in favor of the public instead of the profits for majority company, monopoly company.
Want me to rephrase it?
No, I got it, yeah. 6-year term, right? That's incredibly important. Sheila just mentioned in 2028, there's an integrated resource plan. That sets the trajectory for the next few years on what we're gonna build. Right after that comes the rate case. And you'll recall last year, for whatever reason, we had a rate freeze after 6 rate hikes. And in that rate freeze, normally a rate case, you would do a deep dive on all the costs that are being incurred on the system and who should be paying for it, like data centers. But because the rate freeze last time we had that deep dive was in 2022, before ChatGPT was launched and this influx came. So it is critical that we have pro-consumer majority on the commission in 2028 when we reset rates. That's our first real chance to do that. But there's more than that. I mentioned how I don't want to rest on my laurels and wait for the power company to present their plan. So I started in January already preparing for 28, assuming I'll be there, putting together the resources and the plan that I will proactively put out there. You'll see a little bit of it in a few months, and then you'll see more next year. But I'm just not going to, I think one of the most important things I can do is to build up the staff and our analytical capabilities so we have the firepower to push back on Georgia Power, because if we just wait until they file their plan, it's too late. The work starts now. It started yesterday because, again, they are incredibly well-resourced, Georgia Power, and they can bring anything, throw anything at us. And it's hard to go against that. So it's a heavy lift, but it starts somewhere. I'm a rare bird in that I come to this putting together power efficiency utilities and developing power projects for lots of different folks. And it's going to take that to be able to go up against the strength of Georgia Power. So I think the biggest things that I'll be up against are in 2028, the rate case, the integrated resource plan, and I'm preparing now because we have to have a proactive vision for Georgia, or else we'll just keep doing what we've always been doing, which is, as we've seen, raising power.
So, yeah, Sheila mentioned that there are engineers on the commission, and that is correct. And they are staff members, but they weren't elected to protect. They were elected to provide, they are employees to provide information to the commissioners. The commissioners have to make a decision. And that's what I've done as a technical executive, is understanding technical information and making a decision. The biggest decision we have upcoming is the rate case. But I want to be more specific about that. Right now we have the data center issue. And there are a lot of costs. And I won't get too detailed right now, but there's different ways that they pay bills, the data centers versus residential customers. And some costs are created by the data centers, but paid for by the residential customers. And Georgia Power says, well, these additional fees cover that cost. And that may be true, but we haven't demonstrated that. It hasn't been proven. And so there's a probe going on that's going on right now about that, about the decisions. And Commissioner Hubbard had an amendment to have a more extensive investigation, which directionally I agree with. And as we move towards that in the rate case, we're going to be looking at every bit of detail. It is pretty well established that data centers pay their electricity. That's easy to account. The challenging part is, was this additional transmission line required because of them? Who pays for that? This additional substation, this additional pipeline, these gas reservations, hedge against gas. All of those evaluations are deeply technical. They're very detailed, and they must be accounted for to ensure that data centers are coming and providing a return on investment to ratepayers, not a burden for ratepayers. They should bring value to us. They should not make my power bill or your power bill go up. And that is going to be a central theme in the 2028 rate case.
Thank you so much. All right. I have a question because we are running over. Are y'all willing to stay longer?
We got a hard cut off.
We got a hard cut off. So we're cut off. So, but I want to say thank you for being here. What I would like to do is suggest that we talk to these people after we finish. And I appreciate all of you coming. I did get the second part of our discussion is live streamed on our Facebook page. The first one, we were having internet issues, so we'll see what happened with that. But this part did get live streamed. It's on our Facebook page, so share it and let people know. And my goal, if anybody wants to help me, is to put it on YouTube. And so then we can do pieces, parts, and do some of these. All right? Thank you so much for coming.
Right? And then they would take money